Today we're installing Concept One's Victory Series pulley system on a Gen 1 small block Chevy. The first step is to install the four 3/8-16 studs that secure the two main brackets and the water pump. They must be installed to the correct depth. Before installing the studs, coat the threads with blue Loctite. This will help ensure that the studs do not rotate while tightening the standoff nuts in the next step, and will also help seal the threads. The three 3-inch studs should be installed 3/4 of an inch deep, while the single 4-inch stud should be installed 7/8 of an inch deep. Here, we're prepping the two main brackets for installation. We're using RTV silicone, just a dab, to hold the O-rings in place, to keep them from moving around and getting pinched or falling out during the installation process. You might also prefer to use grease instead of RTV sealant. We supply four 1 1/4 inch O-rings and two 5/8 O-rings. The O-rings seat on both sides of the main brackets. Don't forget the two 5/8 O-rings that go on either side of the passenger main bracket. Process is the same, a little dab of RTV or some grease. Finally, we get to hang the two main brackets onto the engine block. Slide them over the water pump studs and attach them to the block using two 3/8-16 by 1.5 inch flathead cap screws per side. This is a critical step as all other parts attach to these main brackets. The main brackets are 1 inch thick, extra sturdy, and are engineered so that you don't have to bolt anything to your cylinder heads. That means they're compatible with all types and brands of cylinder heads. You can leave this hardware hand tight until after the water pump is installed. The two long standoffs are for the left side of the engine, while the shorter standoffs are for the right side of the engine. Made of stainless steel, the standoffs serve two purposes. They secure the water pump to the engine block and also serve to space out the front brackets that hold on the alternator and the AC compressor. Go ahead and hand tighten them for now. At this time, you can tighten up the 3/8-16 flathead cap screws, torque to spec, and you can also go ahead and tighten down the stainless steel water pump standoffs. Keep in mind that you are tightening against an O-ring, but we've engineered the O-ring channel to the correct depth so that as you tighten the standoffs, you don't have to worry about crushing the O-rings. Works great. This is an alternator spacer along with two 3/8-16 by 1 3/4 socket head cap screws. It's a good idea to put a little anti-seize on the threads of this hardware, as the bolts themselves are chrome plated and they'll be threading into an aluminum bracket. Go ahead and tighten this hardware to spec. Now the fun starts. Here's our layers aluminum power steering pump, unique billet reservoir, along with two 5/16 bolts with washers. And a spacer. This is how it goes together before putting it on the engine. For this video, we went ahead and installed the power steering pump onto the engine with the pulley already in place. Your system will ship with the power steering pulley separate. The pulley installs by way of 3/4-20 socket head cap screws so that there's no need for a press or pulley installer. As you can see, we engineered our power steering pulley so that a ratchet and socket can access the hardware even with the pulley installed. Go ahead and tighten down the power steering pump hardware to spec. Now for the alternator arm and spacers. This supports the front of the alternator. Once again, we're going to go ahead and put a little dab of anti-seize compound on all of this chrome-plated hardware as it threads into an aluminum bracket. Just a little dab is all it takes. Attach the alternator arm to the left side water pump standoffs. Go ahead and install that hardware loosely. That makes it a little easier for you to fit the spacers in, which attach through to the alternator spacer in the rear. It's a good idea to leave all of the alternator arm hardware loose for now. This will make it much easier to fit the alternator in place. Install the crank pulley using three 3/8-24 1-inch long socket head cap screws. It's a good idea to use a little blue Loctite on these threads, and don't forget the washers. Concept One's crank pulley has a register on the rear face that matches up with your harmonic balancer to ensure proper centering. If the face of your crank pulley is not flush with the face of your power steering pulley, your harmonic balancer may not be fully seated. Be sure to check and correct this issue before proceeding any further. The AC compressor arm attaches to the engine in a manner similar to the alternator arm. Hardware connects the arm to the water pump standoffs, and a spacer fits between the arm and the main bracket. Just like with the alternator arm, be sure to leave the AC compressor arm a little bit loose to facilitate the installation of the AC compressor itself. And don't forget to put a little dab of anti-seize on all of the chrome-plated hardware threads. If you've been following along, this is what your installation should look like up to this point. Power steering, water pump, and crank pulley are fully installed. We are ready to tackle the water pump pulley next. Install the water pump pulley using 4 5/16-24 3/4 inch long socket head cap screws. Just grab the water pump pulley and snug the hardware down in a crisscross pattern at this point. You'll be able to torque the bolts at the end of the process once the belt has been installed. The AC compressor uses a mix of SAE and metric hardware, so grab the appropriate tools. We like to start with the top M8 bolt since it's right there in front of you, easy to see. Get that started, which helps line everything up. Then go ahead and do the bottom rear 7/16 bolt. That helps support the weight of the AC compressor. This is a compact SD7 style compressor, but they're pretty heavy. After that, the rest of the hardware should be pretty easy to get started. You can now go ahead and tighten down all of the hardware associated with the AC compressor and the AC compressor brackets. This angle really shows off our heavy-duty brackets and drives home the importance of choosing a system that supports your accessory drive components both front and rear. We supply PowerMaster alternators exclusively. Your alternator will arrive with the pulley installed. You can go ahead and tighten down all of the hardware associated with your alternator and alternator arm at this point. If you've been following along, this is what your engine should look like, and we're in the home stretch. Time to install the tensioner, pulley covers, and the belt. Oh, and the AC manifold. The billet alternator pulley cover is held in place by an O-ring and can be pressed onto the pulley by hand. The AC compressor pulley cover installs with 3 1/4 20 socket head cap screws. You may need to rotate the pulley cover to get the bolt holes to line up. Just be careful to not over tighten these bolts. Next up is the AC compressor manifold. The first step is to remove the steel cover that seals off the compressor ports. Before installing the AC manifold, check that the O-rings are intact and have not been damaged in any way. The AC manifold installs with two M8 flathead cap screws. Hand tighten the two cap screws first, and then go back and torque them to spec. Remember, you're just compressing the O-rings here, so do not over torque the two cap screws. The tensioner fits into a corresponding pad on the AC compressor arm. It can only be installed one way and attaches with a single 3/8-16 bolt. With the tensioner installed, grab yourself a 1/2-inch breaker bar or long 1/2-inch ratchet and have it ready along with your serpentine belt. Wrap your serpentine belt around all of your accessory drive components, leaving your water pump for last. Apply downward pressure to the belt at the water pump pulley. Using your breaker bar, rotate your tensioner downward to increase the slack in the system, and fit the belt under the water pump pulley. Once the belt is in place, check that it is fully seated around all of the pulleys. We like to lift up gently on the breaker bar to make sure that there is no slack left in the system. That's it, you're done, or you're almost done. Now that the belt is installed, the tension will keep the water pump pulley from rotating, so you can go back and tighten the water pump pulley hardware. You can also use this opportunity to make sure that all of the hardware is tight. Everyone at Concept One greatly appreciates you choosing our Serpentine pulley system. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.